She ran through the dark corridor, panic in every step, as the masked figure followed with silent precision, each move a countdown. The blade shimmered in his grip, the end near. Just as he raised it for the final strike, a flash split the air. A man emerged like a shadow torn from time, tall, broad, with muscles wound like steel, eyes glowing in the dim light. His body blocked the scythe mid-swing. Behind him, the girl gasped for breath. No one knew who he was. His coat whipped in the cold smoke, but the enemy's grin faltered. This wasn't going to be easy. It was just supposed to be a quick stop. I was on my way back from a weekend hiking trip with Elise, but she felt carsick and begged to pull over. We found an old rest stop along Highway 41, quiet and half swallowed by trees. My name's Taryn. I'm a biology major, 21, sharp bob haircut, thick glasses, rarely leave the house without a plan. That night, I was tired, hungry, and already regretting saying yes to Elise's detour through the national park. The building looked abandoned. The overhead lights flickered, one buzzing like it was short-circuiting. Elise ran inside first. I followed slower, holding my breath from the mildew stench. The place had broken vending machines, peeling wallpaper, and a single flickering mirror in the women's room. She laughed at how gross it was, then disappeared into the stall. I waited, glancing at my reflection, until the mirror rippled. I stepped back, heart pounding. The air behind me shifted. A voice whispered, low and hoarse, but there was no one else. Suddenly, the lights cut out. Silence dropped like a weight. I turned and something was standing in the hallway. 7 feet tall, draped in a cloak that scraped the floor, face hidden under a tattered hood. Only the eyes showed, 2 red orbs glowing through black smoke. I couldn't scream. It took one slow step forward, metal armor groaning. My legs reacted before my brain did, sprinting toward the exit, but the front doors were gone. Just a stone hallway where tile used to be, like I'd stepped through time. Everything smelled of gunpowder and damp earth. I stumbled onto a battlefield soaked in fog. Dozens of wooden crosses stuck crooked from the mud. In the distance, cannons fired like thunder. I turned, expecting Elise, but she was gone. The creature had followed. Its cloak no longer dragged. It floated, rippling against the wind. It raised one arm and black smoke surged at me like a wave. I tripped over a helmet buried in dirt, coughing, shaking, too slow to run, and then he came. A man in a long brown coat, tall and silent, with piercing blue eyes that cut through the smoke. He stepped between me and the creature, raising his arm. A pale light flared from a strange device he wore, and the smoke recoiled like it was alive. He didn't look at me, just faced the demon like they'd met before. The wind howled around them as the battlefield began to vanish. The man turned, reached for my arm, and everything split. I collapsed back inside the rest stop bathroom, gasping on the cracked tile. Elise stood over me, confused, holding a bottle of water. She asked if I fainted. I looked around. The hallway was just a hallway again. But I couldn't stop shaking. Something followed me back. I still smell the smoke when the lights flicker. I still hear the mud squelch under boots that aren't mine. And every mirror now feels like a doorway I can't trust. It started with the bracelet. Not mine. Not anyone's, really. Just sitting there on the motel nightstand like it had been waiting. Bronze, slightly bent, the kind you'd find in a thrift store, except this one hummed when I touched it. I was supposed to be asleep. Jules was already out cold, one hand still on the TV remote, snoring like she hadn't just eaten 2 chili dogs in record time. Kellen was in the other bed, legs hanging off because he's never fit in a twin mattress. I had class at 9 the next morning. Not that it mattered after what happened. Something about that bracelet pulled at me, like pressure behind the eyes. I slipped it on, half daring something to happen, and the moment the metal touched my skin, the air in the room folded. There was no noise, no flash. One blink and the room was gone. I was standing barefoot in a field of black sand under a sky that didn't belong to Earth. I remember thinking how quiet it was, not peaceful. Quiet like the world had stopped breathing. The sand burned my feet, but I didn't move. Something stood in the distance, watching. I couldn't make it out. Just a dark figure tall enough to blot out part of the moon, or whatever that white disk in the sky was supposed to be. Then I heard her voice. Behind me. Camila. Not Jules. Not someone I'd come with. She was maybe my age, wide eyes, curly hair stuck to her cheeks like she'd been crying. She didn't say help, just my name. like she already knew me. I stepped toward her, but the ground cracked, breaking open like ice underfoot. A deep glow pulsed underneath, red and slow, like breath from something massive. Camilla backed away, mouth moving, but I couldn't hear anymore. It was like sound had peeled off the surface of the air. Then he appeared. I didn't see him walk up. 1 second he wasn't there, then he was, standing between me and whatever had taken shape behind me. He looked older than us, mid-20s maybe, with this long coat that flared even without wind. His hands didn't shake. Camilla ran to him, gripped his arm like it meant something. He glanced at her, nodded once, then looked at me. Not confused, not surprised, like he had come exactly for this. He raised one hand and the sand froze midair. I turned and saw the figure behind me for the first time. Not a monster, exactly, just wrong. Its outline shimmered like oil on water, limbs too long, face unreadable, body stretched like it didn't want to exist here but had to. It tilted its head and took one step forward. That's when the man moved. He didn't charge, didn't shout, just stepped between us and placed his palm flat toward the thing. The sky flickered. Camilla pulled me back fast. We dropped behind a dune, and the air cracked like lightning without sound. When I looked up, the horizon was gone. Just the man standing there, alone. The figure was no longer a figure, just smoke, thinning, vanishing like breath in winter. He stood still until it was completely gone. Then he looked up at the sky and whispered something I couldn't hear. The next moment, we were all three back in the motel room, TV buzzing, Jules still snoring, Kellen waking up, confused. Camilla sat next to me on the edge of the bed, shaking. The man was gone. The bracelet was back on the nightstand, quiet now, cold. I don't know what happened. Not completely. Camilla says we were pulled into something old, a place that exists between seconds. She says that man has been crossing time for a long while, fixing holes. I haven't told anyone else. Who would believe it? But I keep dreaming of the black sand, of the moment the sky paused, just for a second. I keep hearing that crack, that silence, and I haven't taken the bracelet off since. Not because I want to go back, because I'm afraid I will. I kept walking, even though my instincts screamed at me to turn around. The air had shifted, heavier somehow, carrying a scent I couldn't quite name. Not smoke, not earth, something faded, something forgotten. The gravel beneath my shoes turned soft, almost like moss. When I looked down, the road had disappeared, replaced by a narrow path surrounded by tall grass. I hadn't noticed the change happen. I just wasn't where I had been anymore. A soft sound came from ahead like bells. Not cheerful, but low and distant, repeating in uneven rhythm. I hesitated. It didn't feel dangerous, only wrong, like a memory that didn't belong to me. A girl stood a few steps ahead, facing away from me. Her dress looked old, from another time, pale blue and thin at the edges like it had been worn too long. She didn't move when I called out. Before I could reach her, a man stepped out from the grass. He didn't look surprised to see me. His eyes met mine like he'd been expecting someone. His hands stayed relaxed at his sides, but there was tension in the way he stood. I asked where we were, but he shook his head and looked toward the girl. "You shouldn't follow her," he said quietly, almost like he was trying not to wake something. "She isn't what she seems." His name was Eli. He spoke slowly, like each word mattered. He said he'd crossed into this place before and barely made it back. I didn't know what he meant, but something in his voice made me stay still. The girl still hadn't turned. I thought I saw her breathing, but it was hard to tell. The wind moved her hair gently, but nothing else around her stirred. Not the grass, not the trees, not even the air near my own skin. Then she took a step, and the sound returned, those uneven bells. This time they were louder, sharper, like they were coming from inside my own chest. My heartbeat stuttered. I didn't know why I was afraid, but I was. Eli reached out and took my wrist. "You have to leave now," he said. "Not in a minute, not when you're ready. Now." And the way he said it, I didn't ask questions. I turned to run, but the ground had changed again. It wasn't grass anymore, but flat stone, covered in strange circles and marks. Each symbol seemed to pull at my vision, like they were trying to explain something I wasn't meant to know. Eli pulled harder, and we kept moving. Behind us, I finally heard her voice. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even loud, but it had a weight to it, something old and tired. I looked back once, and she had turned, her eyes completely black, her expression unreadable. another figure had joined her. A woman this time, taller, dressed in something dark that looked like woven threads of smoke. Her arms were crossed, her gaze locked on Eli like she remembered him. And maybe she did. He didn't stop until we reached a wooden gate that hadn't been there before. It creaked open without being touched. I stepped through, and the air shifted again, lighter now, warmer, like waking from a fevered sleep. When I looked back, he was still standing at the gate. I asked if he was coming with me. He smiled sadly, but didn't answer. Then the gate closed, and I was alone on a street I recognized. Same cracked sidewalk, same flickering street lamp. I stood there for a long time, trying to understand what had happened. My phone was dead, my hands were cold. The night felt too quiet, but I was home, or something that looked like home. The next day I went back, not to follow the path, just to see if it was still there. It wasn't. Just trees and dirt and a small sign that said private property. No gate, no trail, no sound. I never saw Eli again. But I keep dreaming of bells, always offbeat, always far away at first, then closer. Sometimes when I wake, I find a smear of dust shaped like a circle on my windowsill, and I can never quite remember what the girl's face looked like, only that she was waiting, and that I shouldn't have seen her eyes. I didn't tell anyone. Not about Eli, not about the path, not about the eyes I saw. It felt like the kind of thing you speak out loud and lose forever, or worse, invite back in. A week passed, then another. I kept waking at 3:13 every morning, always the same time, always with that sound still fading in my ears, like metal brushing glass. I tried recording it once, but the tape came back blank, just static. One night, I was walking home from a late shift at the cafe. It had rained. The streetlights made the wet asphalt shine gold. Across the street, a girl with short hair stood still in the shadows, not moving, not watching, just there. I knew that stillness. I slowed, breath shallow, heart thudding unevenly. As I passed, she said a name I hadn't heard before. Callan, not mine, but it froze me anyway. Her voice had a pull to it, like water running backwards. I turned, but she was gone. Just the sound of wind again, brushing leaves that weren't moving. At home, I found a folded piece of old paper on my table. It wasn't mine. It looked like it had been torn from a book. There was a drawing, 3 figures standing under a twisted tree. One had no face, one had no hands, one had no shadow. Beneath it, just a sentence written in uneven ink. When the circle breaks, the crossing begins. The next day, I went to the old university library. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. The building felt heavier than I remembered, like it carried more than just books. An older student named Drew helped me search. He was patient, curious but quiet. Said he'd studied folklore, mostly forgotten ones, the kind that didn't end up in tourist brochures. When I showed him the drawing, his face changed. He said he'd seen that tree before. He led me to a back room where the books were older than the shelves. He found a worn leather journal that didn't have an author's name. Inside, someone had drawn that same tree. Same 3 figures. Same words. We read together. The journal described a liminal place, a thin thread between moments, where time folds, where names are used like doors, a place that called people not by chance, but by absence, the ones who'd slipped through unnoticed. I asked if it was fiction. Drew looked at me and said, "That depends on whether you've heard the bells." I didn't answer. He didn't press. But I saw the way his fingers tightened on the page. Later that night, I dreamed of the girl again. This time, she was standing in a room full of mirrors. Each reflection showed her at a different age. Child, teen, elderly, but all the versions had the same hollow eyes. One of them looked at me and said, "You left Eli behind. You weren't supposed to." I woke with the name Callan echoing again in my head. This time I didn't ignore it. I searched public records, old news, even obituaries. I found one. Callan Rivers. Disappeared in 1998. Last seen walking near the trail by the woods outside town. No sign of struggle, no body, just vanished. His sister's name was on the article too, Nora. I recognized her photo. She was the girl from the shadows. I told Drew everything. He didn't doubt me. Instead, he told me about a theory, that people who entered the slip didn't vanish. They were held, looped in time, waiting for their roles to shift, for someone else to take their place. He believed the gate wasn't random, that Eli had taken someone else's spot, and I'd been meant to follow. I asked if there was a way to go back, to break the circle. He said maybe, but not alone. We planned to return to the woods that weekend. He warned me to remember the feeling of time sliding, of air pressing close. That's how I'd know I was near the crossing again. That's when I'd have to decide. Because once I stepped through again, I wouldn't be the same person anymore. And if the figures came near, I couldn't speak to them. Names were power in that place. Speaking mine might anchor me forever. That night, I fell asleep holding the drawing. This time, I didn't dream of the girl. I dreamed of Eli. He stood in a field of rust-colored grass, the sky above him, blank and endless. He didn't wave. He just nodded, and then he turned toward the tree. The one without leaves, without shadow, without sound, and I followed. I didn't tell anyone I was going back, not even Drew. Something about that night had shifted in me. The field, Eli, the tree. It didn't feel like a warning. It felt like an invitation I had already accepted. The morning was gray and heavy, like the sky was watching. I packed nothing. No phone, no watch, just the old paper with the drawing, now creased at the corners. I slipped it into my jacket and walked to the edge of town. There was a woman standing by the trailhead, not looking at me, just quietly humming. Her hair was silver, cut short, and she wore a long coat that brushed her boots. She didn't speak, but stepped aside when I passed. It didn't take long before the trees changed. They bent lower, and the dirt felt softer underfoot. The air thinned, but not in a choking way, more like it was choosing what I could breathe. I paused, then stepped off the main path. The sound faded as I walked. Birds, wind, even the crunch of twigs. All of it dulled, like I'd sunk a little deeper with every step. Ahead, the tree from the drawing rose in the distance, bare, angular, out of place in every direction. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned quickly, half expecting Drew. But it was someone else, a tall man with warm skin and dark hair, his expression calm but unreadable. He said his name was Caleb and that he had seen the tree too. He didn't ask who I was or why I came. He only said if I had passed through once, it would call me again. And if I crossed it now, something would need to stay in my place. Something borrowed, something forgotten. I asked how he knew that. He said he used to be someone else. His voice didn't tremble. He asked about the boy I saw in the field. I told him his name. Caleb nodded, like that confirmed something. Then he said the boy had made a choice. A second figure stepped from the woods. A girl, younger than me, maybe 16. Her eyes were wide but dry, her hands shaking just slightly. She didn't speak at all, but she looked at Caleb like she trusted him with the last thread of her life. He said her name was Marin, that she hadn't meant to find the crossing. She followed a sound, same as me. The bell, soft and distant, always in the same rhythm. I realized I'd been hearing it too, faintly under the silence. They walked with me until the edge of the clearing. Then Caleb stopped. He said he could only go so far, that this part, the part with the shadow under the tree, had to be crossed alone. I looked at Marin, then at the tree, then back at him. He placed something in my palm, a small stone, smooth and black, cold to the touch. He said if I felt the ground shifting, I should drop it, that the stone would remember the way back, even if I forgot. I nodded, holding it tightly. As I stepped forward, everything around me stilled again. Even my breath felt borrowed. The closer I got, the taller the tree became, like space didn't work the same near its roots. I could see now there were others, standing, silent, almost part of the bark. One of them turned. It looked like Eli, but not quite. His face was older, his eyes tired. He looked at me, and I knew. I wasn't here to rescue anyone. I was here to understand why they stayed. He raised a hand and pointed behind me. I turned and saw the trail, faint now, already fading. I felt the stone pulse once in my palm. The girl's voice echoed, not near but inside. You decide what stays. You decide what remembers. I dropped the stone. The ground opened like breath, wide and slow, and then I fell, not down but through. Through time, through sound, through the space between every version of myself I had ever been. When I woke, I was in the library again. But it wasn't the same. Drew was gone. The books were different, new names on the shelves, and on the table beside me, a smooth black stone, warm in the light. I don't know how long I had been gone. I only know the bell still rings sometimes. And when it does, I listen, but I do not move. Not anymore. I understand now. Some crossings aren't meant to be reversed, only remembered. The motel hadn't changed. Same flickering neon sign, same humming vending machine near the stairs. I hadn't meant to stop here again, but my car stalled just as I passed the exit. I laughed at the timing, though it didn't feel funny. Inside, the air smelled like old carpet and air freshener. The woman at the desk was new, maybe mid-30s, auburn curls tied back, eyes sharp but kind. She handed me the key like she'd already seen this happen before. Room 12. Same room I stayed in years ago. The bedspread was different, but the mirror above the desk still had that faint crack at the corner. I dropped my bag, turned on the lamp, and sat, not tired but unsure why I wasn't leaving. I kept thinking about Caleb and the stone, about how I woke up in that library. This place shouldn't be connected, but something pulled at my chest. Not fear, not exactly, more like the feeling you get before a storm. There was a knock around midnight, not loud, just enough to make me freeze. I opened the door without thinking, half asleep. A woman stood there, younger than me, wearing a red hoodie too big for her. She asked if I was the one who left the stone. I told her no, or maybe I said I didn't know. She stepped inside anyway, eyes scanning the room, hands never still. Her name was Elise. She said she found the tree 3 days ago, and now she couldn't stop seeing the faces. Faces in the glass, in the TV when it was off, in reflections of puddles. She spoke fast, like if she stopped, they'd catch up. I asked who she meant. She shook her head, said they weren't people anymore. They were memory. Then the TV flickered on, static, no remote nearby. Elise backed toward the door, whispering something.
I couldn't catch. I walked to the screen and reached to turn it off, but just before my finger touched the button, the image changed. It wasn't a channel, it was a hallway, dim, narrow, lined with doors, and someone was walking down it, slowly, toward the screen. I couldn't see their face, just the way they moved, like they knew exactly where they were going. The girl grabbed my arm, pulling me back. She said the hallway was from the place between, the part you don't walk unless you're ready to forget who you are. Her fingers were ice cold and her voice shook for the first time. I asked how she found me. She said my name had been scratched into a tree outside her window. Not carved, scratched, over and over. She didn't know who did it, only that she couldn't sleep until she saw me. That's when the lights went out. Not just in our room, the entire motel. We stood there listening. Nothing. No steps, no voices. Just the low buzz of the TV, which was somehow still on. The hallway figure had stopped walking. Elise stepped closer. Her breath hitched. The screen now showed our room. Same angle, same lighting, and we were in it. But behind us, another figure stood, still, watching. I turned around, but no one was there. When I looked back at the screen, Elise was gone. In the image, I stood alone. The door opened behind me in the reflection. In real time, I heard the knob turn, but the door didn't open. I rushed forward and locked it, heart pounding, skin cold. I looked at the TV again. The screen was black now, like nothing had ever happened. The next morning, the woman at the desk told me there was no Elise checked in, no guests on the second floor at all. I walked to the lot. My car started perfectly. I didn't go back to the tree. I didn't need to. It's part of me now. Every time I close my eyes, I see the hallway. And I know one day I'll have to walk it. The only choice is when. I wasn't supposed to be at that antique shop. I only stopped because the sky cracked open and dumped rain like someone tipped a bucket. It sat at the end of a narrow street, tucked between a record store and a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and regret. The sign said closed, but the door creaked open before I touched it. The man behind the counter looked like he belonged to another era. Suit too stiff, hands too still. He didn't ask what I wanted. He just said she left something for me, then turned his back and disappeared into the back room. I should have walked out, but the warmth of the place wrapped around me in a way that felt familiar. He came back with a mirror, oval frame, bronze, the kind you'd see in your grandmother's hallway. He set it down gently and said, "Don't stare too long." I asked who she was. He didn't answer. He just pointed at the mirror, eyes never blinking, like he was holding something back. I don't remember walking out with it, but I found myself in my apartment with the mirror on my kitchen table. It was heavier than I thought, the surface too clean, almost like it didn't reflect anything at all. I caught my own eyes in the glass and felt a tug deep in my chest, like being reeled backward. That night, I dreamt of a hallway I'd never seen. Wooden floors warped with age, walls covered in peeling wallpaper, and numbers that didn't make sense. Room 3A, room 7H, then just symbols. I walked barefoot,